In the fear of the Lord, one has strong confidence, and his children will have a refuge. This is a proverb. Proverbs are truisms, not promises. Okay? This proverb says that, if there's like an if or a contingency portion of this verse. In the fear of the Lord, one has strong confidence, and his children will have a refuge. So this is just something that is generally true, and I want to unpack what this passage says is generally true with regards to those who fear the Lord. And I specifically want to tie it in to Father's Day. So that's the plan for this morning. I'm going to start with just the first half of this verse, and we just try to be expositional in our teaching here, meaning that when we open up the Bible, here's the thing. There are a lot of people who can stand up here and they can be very engaging and they tell really good stories, and I'm really bad at that. I'm just not a creative storytelling dude, but I like to explain things. That's just what I gravitate towards. So our teaching style here is what we would call expositional. We go to a passage and we say, okay, what's this saying? We try to explain it. We try to explain it in a way that draws your attention to the God who spoke it, so that it turns into worship. So preaching it's not just storytelling. Sometimes you can tell some stories if you're good at it. It's not just like robotic, I'm not just a talking commentary. It's also worship. It's also worship. So I hope that's where God takes us today, is worship. As we look at what this text says, the first half of the verse to begin with reads like this: in the fear of the Lord, one has strong confidence. So let's take it apart. The fear of the Lord. What kind of fear are we talking about here? Because we've mentioned it a few times this morning. In fact, I was thinking at some point, I should pause and make some side comment to just kind of clarify that we're going to explain what the fear of the Lord is. We've been talking about it all morning. I don't know that for a long time I had a very good sense for what the Bible meant when it talks about the fear of the Lord. And the Bible actually talks about it quite a bit. What kind of fear are we talking about here? Well, we're not talking about unsolved mysteries fear. I grew up in a home. I would watch Unsolved Mysteries with my mom. And, look, a story. Hey, here we go. I would watch Unsolved Mysteries with my mom, and I loved it. I loved watching it, but it freaked me out. It's like, it tells this story about some kidnapping mass murderer loose in New Mexico, and then it ends, and it's like, and they never caught him. And I'm like, I live in New Mexico. And I was really scared. Well, we're not talking about that kind of fear, like murder in the night type of sneak up under your bed, boogie monster fear. We're talking about a fear that admires something great and trembles at the greatness. There's an admiration to it, and there's a trembling. It is to be so impressed with God's greatness. To fear God is to be so impressed with the greatness of who He is that it makes you gulp. And I hesitate to try to illustrate, because nothing I do will leave you gulping hard enough. But it's worth trying just to give us a flavor. And so I've got a little video here of a man named Alex Honnold. And I'll just have you watch this, and we'll talk a little bit more about the fear of the Lord in just a second.
So, in terms of free soloing, undoubtedly the greatest free soloist that ever lived is this kid, Alex Rodman. Pretty quiet, grew up in the suburbs of Sacramento, and he pretty much, you think next generation, what are people going to do? Well, he's kind of skipped a generation and started soloing things that were unthinkable I'm going to play a quick little video from about Alex.
Free soloing has to be the ultimate in free climbing.
It's always a beautiful day to go out soloing.
To free solo is to go without a rope, to go without gear, to only have your rock shoes and your chalk bag and the power of the mind. It's also very profound. The reason it's probably the ultimate is because one wrong move, you fall, you die.
Yeah, let me try that again.
And the person at the top of this game, and it's hard to even call this a game, is Alex Honnold. Alex Honnold is probably a perfect example. He is someone who's not only trained very hard, but is unbelievably gifted. He is like Michael Jordan.
I spent my whole year living in the van, traveling from one destination to another.
Yeah, I would say that Yosemite probably is the center of my climbing. That all my climbing goals, all like training, all kind of revolves around things that I want to do in Yosemite. This is by far my favorite place for soloing. Because the walls are so inspiring, like everything here is so big, and that's like what gets me excited about soloing stuff.
One of the most memorable moments was pitch like 22 with a nose. I put my rope away and I switched to soloing. I just had a moment of like, this is like surreally cool. I was like, I can't believe I'm up here with no rope, just climbing. Like, this is rad.
Now Alex has now done the regular route on Half Dome, free solo. So for most people on this planet who are serious climbers, doing Half Dome in a day or two is considered fantastic. Alex did it in 3 hours without a rope.
You know, you commit, you're like, I'm doing this, here I go. But then after like a couple hours of being all committed, you're like, man, I'm tired. And like, you know, your mind starts to get a little bit tired. And so I kind of stalled out, and then I started to doubt if I was doing it right or if I had the right holds. Why am I even here? You know, do I want to do this?
Just come back, you're not feeling it. Well, that's the thing, because I'm like,
And that stalled him out, that paralyzed him.
Right. Paralyzed me. This is the moment right here that I want to capture in Alex's journey up the mountain. He's considering the vast, majestic greatness of the mountain and the height at which he's standing, and he's considering the greatness of the mountain that he's attempting to conquer, and he's perceptive to his own fragility, and for a moment, he's paralyzed with a fear for the greatness, combined with his own awareness of his frailty. The fear of the Lord is beholding and admiring and considering and trembling at greatness. Now, this verse goes on to say that in the fear of the Lord, one has strong confidence. Doesn't look too confident. Odd choice of words, I think. It would seem that strong confidence is the wrong choice of words, actually. So what's going on here? What's going on here? What this means is that when you fear God, it actually puts you in a place of security. Or as the New International Version translation says, in the fear of the Lord, whoever fears the Lord has a secure fortress. Meaning, when you admire and you tremble at God, you are in a safe place. You're in a place of security. When you fear the Lord, though you have a sense of your own frailty, you are in that very act of fearing Him, availing yourself of some sort of protective shelter. You're somehow hiding yourself within a fortress. You have a strong confidence. So how does that work? In what sense does fearing God provide you with safety or with confidence? Well, for one thing, Fearing God gives you safety in a general kind of sense because the person who fears God does not toy with God. Doesn't take his word lightly, for example. He listens to warnings in the scripture. He's setting his eye on the true treasure of Jesus. He's being careful to take measured steps of obedience. He's walking in the ways of the Lord. He's making every effort to live a life of worship and walk in the path that leads to life because God cares about what we love. God cares about how we live. And the man or woman who fears God will take actually desperate measures to ensure that they're not taking this great God lightly. In the moment that Alex Honnold is fearing the mountain, he's not taking this thing lightly. In that moment, he's holding on for dear life, and in some sense, that's a safe place to be. Simply because playing recklessly on the mountain isn't safe. Now, he makes it to the top. He's amazing. He's an amazing athlete. But playing recklessly with the mountain is not safe. If you play with fire, you're going to get burned. That's the saying, right? Just count on it. Just count on it. It's safer to fear fire than it is to recklessly play with fire. It's safer to fear the ocean than it is to recklessly play with the ocean. It's safer to fear a lion than it is to recklessly play with a lion. I was living in New York a few years back, 2012, on my front porch, filming Hurricane Sandy as it was raging through our neighborhood. Second costliest hurricane in U.S. history, 7.5 million people without power. Ours was out for about 10 days. We spent a lot of time up at Jacques and Katie's house because they had power. Killed over 200 people total. And as I'm filming on the front porch, I chose not to show the film because it doesn't look as bad as it was. But as I'm filming, I'm like, whoa, whoa, and I'm like, whoa. I start backing up, whoa, and I'm like back into my house, into the safety of my house, because I'm fearing the greatness, and so I'm taking precautions. I'm taking measured steps. I'm living aware of the fact that we don't toy with hurricanes. Reverence, cautious respect. Therefore, fearing God, I would say, produces or provides a certain type of safety because God is like a hurricane. Right? God is not a toy. He has the power of life. He has the power of death. God has the power of eternity. And when we respect that, it produces cautiousness in us so that we take care to honor Him. And that keeps us from harm's way. Sort of. Or to some extent, it keeps us from harm's way. But I don't think that that's what this verse is getting at. The safety that cautiousness provides is not the safety that this verse is talking about. Look at the kind of wording that this uses. In the fear of the Lord, one has strong confidence. Or the NIV, whoever fears the Lord has a secure fortress. Now, my fear of the hurricane may drive me back into the house, and that provides a certain type of safety, but the fact is the hurricane can break through a house, like no problem. People were killed in this hurricane, in their house. So where's the strong confidence that this verse is talking about? Where does the secure fortress come from? That's strong language. What the verse is teaching is that the fear of the Lord provides safety, not only because it produces caution and prudence and honor and obedience to God, but far more importantly, this verse is telling us that this great and mighty God is inclined to use that same great might on behalf of those who fear Him. In other words, with God, those who fear His greatness move into the realm of the protection from that greatness, or protection by the power of that greatness. Those who fear the hurricane are sheltered by the hurricane and then protected from outside harm with the power of a hurricane. Those who fear the lion are befriended by the lion and thereby are brought into the safety provided by the lion from outside harm. So yes, God is to be feared, but God promises to grant favor and security to those who fear Him. Listen to these verses on the fear of the Lord. Psalm 25:14. The friendship of the Lord is for those who fear Him. Are you friends with God? Psalm 34:7. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear Him. Psalm 85:9. Surely His salvation is near to those who fear Him. Psalm 111:5. He provides food for those who fear Him. Psalm 145:19. He fulfills the desire of those who fear Him. Psalm 147:11. The Lord takes pleasure in those who fear Him. And Luke 1:50. His mercy is for those who fear Him. So, fearing God, admiring God's greatness, and trembling at the greatness of who He is crucial if you'd like friendship, if you'd like His protection, if you'd like His deliverance, His salvation, His provision, His satisfaction of the deepest soul thirsts of your life. His favor, His mercy is for those who fear Him. So, when we fear the Lord, we're not only taking Him seriously and being cautious, and that provides a little bit of safety, but He responds to that humble posture by committing Himself to us to do good to those who fear Him. And that's why in the fear of the Lord, one has strong confidence or a secure fortress. Because those who fear the Lord are brought into the safety of the mighty one. And what's even sweeter about this verse today is that our fear of the Lord provides a secure fortress, not only for us, but for our children. Let's read the whole verse one more time. In the fear of the Lord, one has strong confidence, and his children will have a refuge. His children will have a refuge. Daddy's fear of the Lord creates a refuge for his children. There are two principles here that I want to talk about, and the first one is this. Water flows downhill. Okay? That is to say, fathers have incredible influence on their children. What we do, what we believe, what we say, who we are has incredible influence on our children. When dad fears the Lord, this verse says that his children have a refuge. Now, to be fair, this verse is not exclusively aimed at dads. So everything I'm going to say today, you can apply it to moms too. And since it's Father's Day, I'm going to zero in on dads because it's particularly relevant for us today. For those of you who are not fathers or mothers, note these principles. Note these principles because you had a father and a mother, or you have a father and a mother, and you'll see that some of this relates to all of our lives. But fathers, what we do, what we say, what we believe, who we are, powerfully impacts our children. Now, this doesn't mean that a father is the cause of a child's righteousness. It is not the cause of a child's sin. But it is fair to say that a father has the power to set up a child for great success or great failure. We can provide the groundwork that leads to a godly blessing in their lives. We can provide them instruction and modeling and protection and provision. Listen to Proverbs 20, verse 7. The righteous who walks in his integrity, blessed are his children after him. What a blessing it is for a child to have a father who walks with God. Dads, we have the opportunity to show our children what it looks like to follow God. And if our children are young, we still have the opportunity to raise them up in the ways of the Lord. I want to tell you a story. I'm a storyteller today. Check that out. Actually, I'm going to read to you. I'm just going to read to you. I'm going to read to you from a book called Anchorman, written by a guy named Ron Burgundy. No, I'm just kidding. By a guy named Steve Farrar. Anchorman. He tells the story of two men, one by the name of Dennis Rodman and one by the name of Howard Stern. Anybody not heard of Dennis Rodman or Howard Stern? Dennis Rodman was, my children haven't, okay, is he? Okay, Dennis Rodman was a basketball player in the NBA. Howard Stern was a radio talk show DJ. And you'll hear a little bit about their life right here. Steve Farrar, this is a pretty long quote. Dennis Rodman and Howard Stern have a lot in common. They're both famous. They're both rich. They're both profane. They're both rebellious. They're both rude. They are both national role models. They both appear in public dressed as women. So what's the explanation for these two adolescents who are trapped in the bodies of men? The explanation of both of them is their fathers. Dennis Rodman has not seen his father in 30 years. His father now lives in the Philippines and has 2 wives. By those 2 wives, he has 15 children. But over the years, he's fathered a total of 27 children. According to a recent statement in Newsweek, philanderer Rodman Jr., that's his dad, stated his life goal, shooting for 30. Here's a man who hasn't seen one of his sons for 30 years, but has set a goal to father 30 children. That actually helps to explain Dennis Rodman. What about Howard Stern? Anybody ever listen to Howard Stern? He's a crude dude, right? In a recent interview with Rolling Stone, Stern let his guard down. I will never have a lot of self-esteem. Now, I'm not promoting self-esteem here, but you'll get the feel for what we're after. I will never have a lot of self-esteem. I don't feel good about myself. I still have an inferiority complex. The way I was raised, my father was always telling me I was a piece of expletive. I think I'll go to my grave not feeling very positive about myself or that I'm very, very special. My mother used to tell me how special I was. Every time I hear my mother's voice going, "You're the most special little boy in the world," I hear my father going, "You expletive, expletive. You're nothing but a piece of expletive." Can you imagine a father, continuing the quote, talking to a child like that? Now I know why Stern talks to millions of people every day on the radio like that. Why did Howard Stern's father talk to him like that? I think that Howard's father talked to him like that because when his father was a young boy, his father talked to him like that. In other words, the problem of degrading young boys with poisoned speech in the Stern family probably didn't begin with Howard's father. It may have been started, and it may have, okay, let me say this again. The problem of degrading young boys with poisoned speech in the Stern family probably didn't begin with Howard's father, and it may not have started with his father. It's entirely possible that kind of speech has been in the Stern family for generations. And what about philanderer Rodman? Do you think that Dennis Rodman's father came from a home where he saw his father being faithful to his mother? I can't prove this because I don't have access to the Rodman family genealogy, but I don't think it's too far off the mark to assume that the reason Dennis Rodman hasn't seen his father for 30 years is that his father wasn't used to seeing his father. Proverbs 20 verse 7 gets to the heart of the matter. A righteous man who walks in his integrity, how blessed are his sons after him. Fathers with integrity don't label their children with profane names. And they don't abandon one wife to marry two more. Rodman and Stern have a lot of money and a lot of fame, but they are not blessed men. And the reason they are not blessed, according to Proverbs, is that they had very deficient fathers. End quote. Now, a qualifier. Dennis Rodman and Howard Stern are responsible for their own sin, not their fathers. The way you respond to somebody who sinned against you is your responsibility before Almighty God. But that does not nullify the fact that these men were set up for failure. They did not have the advantage of having godly fathers to influence them in the ways of the Lord. These fathers did not walk in the fear of the Lord. They did not love righteousness, and their sons therefore are not reaping blessing. Because their fathers either didn't know or they didn't care that water flows downhill. They didn't tremble before God at the awesome responsibility that they had to influence their children. I'm going to read to you some stats from 2000. Switzerland's Federal Statistic Office published the results of a study in which they asked this question: does a person's religion carry through to the next generation, and why or why not? Okay, ask the Swiss. Here's what they found. In families where both father and mother are regular attendees. By the way, the goal is not to get people to just attend church, which I'll talk about in a minute. But this is very interesting. In families where both father and mother were regular attendees, 33% of their children ended up becoming a regular churchgoer. Okay? 1 out of every 3 children. Mom and dad are faithful to attend church. 1 out of every 3 children will grow up to be faithful to attend church. In families where the father attends regularly, but the wife is non-practicing, 44%. Almost 1 out of every 2 become regular churchgoers. If the mother attends regularly and the father is non-practicing, 2%. 1 out of every 50. When these stats, together with a bunch of other additional stats that they did, are all added up, here's the conclusion of the matter, according to Touchstone magazine. In short, if a father does not go to church, no matter how faithful his wife's devotions, only 1 child in 50 will be a regular worshiper. If a father does go regularly, regardless of the practice of the mother, between 2/3 and 3/4 of their children will become churchgoers, either regular or irregular. If a father goes even but irregularly to church, regardless of his wife's devotion, 1/2 and 2/3 of their offspring will find themselves, I think 1/2 to 2/3 of their offspring will find themselves coming to church regularly or occasionally. Now, here's the point. Here's not the point. The point is not to discourage moms. Okay? There are other stats that we could use for Mother's Day, and we'll probably track those down and use those in the future. But the point is this: church-going dads tend to produce church-going children. Why? Because water flows downhill, and dad, you produce a lot of water in your family. Which brings me to the second principle. God intends for you, dads, to provide a heritage of God-fearing safety for your children. In the fear of the Lord, one has strong confidence, or a refuge. And his children will have a refuge. You fear the Lord, you've got safety, and your kids have safety. So here's the deal. Those stats are very interesting, but this verse doesn't talk about the man who goes to church. It talks about the man who actually fears the Lord. And the man who actually fears the Lord provides not just church-going kids for some statistics' sake, he provides refuge for his children. Fathers, fear the Lord and give your children a refuge, because they will tend to follow your lead, and eventually they will fear the Lord themselves. I want to paint the picture for you. I want to paint the picture of the man who fears the Lord and how it provides refuge for his children. I want to do it in Deuteronomy chapter 6. Deuteronomy chapter 6. You can turn there. How does a father's fear of the Lord produce refuge for his kiddos? Deuteronomy 6. In Deuteronomy 6, Moses is preparing the nation of Israel to head into the promised land. Before they go in, he wants to make sure they're deeply committing themselves to the Word of God, the law that God had given to his people at Mount Sinai. And Moses has some special instructions for the fathers, because God has a strategy for ensuring the health of this nation as they head into the land. Here's the strategy. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 1 to 3. Now this is the commandment, the statutes and the rules that the Lord your God commanded me to teach you, Moses says, that you may do them in the land to which you are going over to possess it, that you may fear the Lord your God, you and your son and your son's son, by keeping all his statutes and his commandments, which I command you, all the days of your life, and that your days may be long. Hear therefore, O Israel, and be careful to do them, that it may go well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you, in the land flowing with milk and honey. So do you catch the strategy there? Moses is saying, here's God's word, I'm going to teach it to you so that you will obey it, so that you and your son and his son will fear the Lord. I'm going to teach you the word. I want you to fear me, and I want your son to fear me, and I want his son to fear me. It's nearly 100 years of influence, 3 generations. Father fears the Lord. Son fears the Lord. Son fears the Lord. Here's Steve Farrar's attempt to explain what's going on here. When Joe Israel, and let me just say this, hey, this is going to set some high standards, and that's going to bring up some baggage, and we're going to deal with it. So hang on with me. When Joe Israel follows God with everything when Joe Israel follows God with everything he has, his son sees this. His son knows that there's nothing more important to his father than loving God. And because his father loves God, his father loves his mother. His father loves Joe Israel Jr., and he loves Joe Jr.'s brothers and sisters. Joe Jr. has friends whose dads constantly degrade them and put them down. As Joe looks around at his friends, he realizes that he has the best dad around. And as he gets older, it becomes more and more clear to him that the reason his father is such a great father is that God is at the center of his life. Time goes by, and Joe Israel Jr. grows up and marries a very fine girl by the name of Rebecca Levi. Israeli. It's not long before Joe Israel III comes along. And Joe Israel III is a great kid who loves being with his dad, and he loves to go over to his grandfather's house. Joe Israel III is a pretty lucky kid. Not only does he have a great dad, he has a grandfather who's off the church. As he gets older, he sees some of his friends becoming deeply wounded when their fathers divorce their mothers. Joe Israel III realizes how fortunate he is to have a father and a grandfather who would never divorce their wives. As Joe Israel III continues to mature, he realizes that the reason he's so blessed by a great father and a wonderful grandfather is that God is at the center of their lives. God is number one in the Israel family. And not only does he have a grandfather who is anchored on the God of Israel, he has a father who is anchored as well. Joe Israel III is sad when his grandfather dies. But he knows that one day he'll be with him forever in heaven. Even when his grandfather is gone, he doesn't drift. And the reason he doesn't drift is that his father is that he has a father who is still anchored. And that's why when Joe Israel III becomes a father, he will be anchored on God as well. And because he is anchored, his children will not be part of a drifting family. Now, I realize there's a lot of brokenness in this room. There's a lot of broken families. There's a lot of broken heritage in this room. A lot of people who have a chain of brokenness. And I want you to know that by the grace of God, wherever you are today, God offers the opportunity to begin leaving a new legacy of godliness. Let me show you what it might look like. It is God's design that every child should be raised with a legacy of godliness. And the heritage that should be passed from one generation to the next generation to the next generation is the fear of the Lord. A heritage of awe at the great God of the universe. Walking in His ways. A life of Christ worshiping satisfaction that our children and our grandchildren have seen and actually tasted in their own fathers and their own grandfathers. Boys and girls are not meant to grow up in a home where they've never seen godly men walking in the fear of the Lord. That's just not the design. Children need to see what it looks like to have a dynamic relationship with Jesus Christ. They need to see Daddy and Grandpa praying together. They need to hear Dad sing praises to Jesus because he sold out for Jesus Christ. They need to watch him lay down his life in servant leadership for Mom. Little boys need to see that. Little girls need to see that. They need to watch Dad stand up for what's right, even if Dad has to suffer for doing what's right. They need Dad to teach them with wise insight from the Word of God. They need to see what godly character looks like. They need to talk with Dad about what relationships are supposed to look like and their feelings and what it means to be a man. What does it mean to be a woman of God? They need Dad to teach them. They need Dad to teach them what it looks like to work hard and to serve with joy and to handle stress and to admit their failures. Will somebody show me how to be humble enough to admit that you've made mistakes? Little kids need that. They need somebody to show them what it looks like to have integrity and what it looks like to be faithful to your word. They need dads who are at home. They need grandpa to tell them Bible stories. They need to know what it looks like to follow Jesus long and hard. They need to know what it looks like to have a marriage that lasts. They need to know what it looks like to suffer well. They need to know what it looks like to face illness. They need to know what it looks like to die well, trusting in the eternal promises of God that will outlast the sufferings of this world. Because if they don't see it in you, Dad, where are they going to learn it from? Where are they going to learn it? You have to figure it out on their own. Because there's no heritage. They need to grow up in an environment that soaks them with a fountain of the fear of God, so that they don't have to figure it out on their own. In the fear of the Lord, one has strong confidence, and his children will have a refuge. Because they're taking refuge in the same God that Dad's taking refuge in. When a man fears the Lord, his children see what it looks like to fear the Lord Almighty. They taste it, they learn from it, they're coached through it, and they grow up in it. And I know what some of you are thinking. When you hear that this is how a family is supposed to be, it shines some light on how your family maybe actually was or is. And you're thinking, I did not grow up with that kind of grandpa. And I did not grow up with that kind of dad, and I'm not that kind of dad. My family does not have a godly heritage to hand down. My family does not look like that. So, what am I supposed to do? My family has legalism, control, divorce, alcoholism, anger, abuse, stoicism, sexual abuse, materialism. Look, I'm not trying to stir up any resentment toward your parents. And I'm not trying to stir up any condemnation for the life that you've lived. I know that we have baggage, and I know that this kind of discussion brings it to the surface, but the purpose is not to stir resentment, and it's not to stir condemnation. The purpose is to free you from the bondage of those failures. That you do not have to continue living that way, and you do not have to hand off the same heritage. I suspect that for some of us, Satan can powerfully tempt you to fear that you're trapped as though you're in a series of links that just keeps repeating the same story. Generation after generation after generation of total wreckage. And I don't care whether you're a single, or a father, or a grandfather. I don't care if your dad was controlling, or distant, or weak, or abusive. You need to know that because of the gospel of Jesus Christ, you do not have to be the next link in a rusty chain of godlessness filled with half-hearted men and women who leave no refuge for their children and no refuge for their grandchildren. Because of the gospel, you can start right now, and you can be the man of God or the woman of God that He has called you to be for the rest of your days. I don't care if you screwed it up your whole life up to this very point. The gospel says you just don't have to keep going that direction. And you don't have to live in the bondage of being the next link in the chain. You can be the first link in a new chain. You can be the anchor for a new heritage. A line of men and women who are sold out for Jesus and who fear the Lord. And it's not because we're any better than any previous generation that came before us. It's not that we're more worthy than those came before us. It's simply because of God's grace. And He's extending an offer to you, every man, woman, and child in this room right now. You have the option of setting a new course because of the gospel. So do you want your life to count? Do you want it to count? Do you want to invest in something that's going to be producing eternal fruit 100 years from now? Do you want to provide a refuge for your children? Then hear this is good news. Receive Christ's free forgiveness for the failures. And surrender your life to Him and walk in newness of life. And be the anchor of a new heritage. If you're trusting in Jesus, the Bible says you're a new creation. And so I want to encourage you and charge you to live for Christ's agenda. Live for God's purposes. Live under God's word. Be a man, be a woman of God. And make every other pursuit of secondary importance. And be an anchor. Be an anchor for your family. Let's pray.